Andy Lee is with us. Andy, how are you?
Good morning, Jay.
So we want to talk about the heavyweights. Tyson Fury has demonstrated that if there is one way to win American hearts, it's to knock somebody out early and then sing while dressed as Apollo Creed. It's like there's a template there.
He's
now
getting better
has
at
to follow.
singing. He's getting better. I remember he did the same song after he fought Vladimir. That one was a bit cringy, but this one was a lot better. This rendition. Donald, did you see it on?
Yeah, it was good. It was good. Like I'm not sure what base we're actually judging him off, but he's certainly putting together a try. Like I wonder if that's something he practices.
Again, start low. You know, make expectations be pretty low, and then if you get better after that, it's like, actually, you've been working on this.
Yeah, he's definitely improved. Yeah, he did it was mission accomplished by all means, because there was no doubt he was going to beat Tom Swartz, but how he could beat him, and the fact that he had this, this outrageous entrance and put on the show and sang the song, as you just mentioned. And I think all the week of the fight, he was doing a lot of media and publicity, and he really sold himself over there. Yeah,
because you have to, right? And that's the opportunity right now, especially after what had happened when Joshua went over and completely flunked.
As well as Cellison, the most important part of that would be getting a stoppage or a knockout, which he did. Because in America, they don't want to see 12 rounds of boxing. After 4 or 5 rounds, if you're a heavyweight, they'll start booing if it's anyway tentative. So they want to see action, and no, he did his job. He did his job perfectly.
Because there's been times in the past where he's kind of boxed down to the level of the person he's fighting. And almost every boxer in history has done at various stages, and he hasn't been able to get fighters out who are inferior fighters. There's been some kind of boring fights where he's just jabbed his way around. Obviously, it was a decision made to go and look, let's just do this.
I think so. I think he had to. I think he probably knew that there was some pressure on him to get him out of there and kind of cement himself as the #1 heavyweight. Over his last few fights, the 2 previous fights, 2 fights prior to Wilder, I think he was definitely using it as practice to get rounds in, and so he went the distance with those guys where he probably could have stopped them, but no, this was a very more intent Tyson, and he went about his job very seriously.
Okay, we'll talk a bit more about what's changed for him on and off, or in and out of the ring rather, but I'm delighted to say we're about to be joined by one of the most familiar voices in the boxing world. Let's listen to Mike Costello here, called the final passage of the remarkable third round in Anthony Joshua's bout with Andy Ruiz Jr. for BBC Radio 5 Live. Have a listen.
25 seconds to go in round 3. Joshua close to his own corner, leans in with a jab to the body now. Ruiz, is he also getting tired after the exertions of this round? A sensational round of heavyweight boxing. Ruiz goes forward again and opens up, and he catches Joshua with a right hand. Joshua holds on. This could be close to the finish. Joshua goes down again for the second time in the round. At the end of the third round, will he rise to his feet? He's on unsteady legs again. He rolls back. Will the referee allow him to continue? As Jack Reese did with Tyson Fury, the referee is allowing Joshua back. Anthony Joshua saved by the bell. What a round! And he is wobbling back to his corner. One of the great rounds in the history of heavyweight boxing. One of the great rounds we've seen here in Madison Square Garden.
Yeah, good stuff, Mike. How are you? Good morning to you.
Good morning, fellas.
Hair in the back of your neck there. Have you listened back to that?
I've seen it back on the video that our producer recorded at ringside, so I try not to, because I'll only pick holes in it. So
no, you can't pick any holes in that.
That was a special night, and one that was unexpected. We all thought the big story in certainly in British sport that day would be the Champions League final, and a lot of the British fans that were over there were parked up somewhere in bars around New York in the afternoon, thinking that would be the main event, and that Joshua would just go through the motions during the evening against Andy Ruiz. But heavyweight boxing, you just never know. And listening to you both talking there, we've now got 2 fights to look forward to. The rematch between Deontay Wilder and Tyson Fury, and the rematch between Anthony Joshua and Andy Ruiz. I can't think of a time in recent years when the heavyweight division has had 2 such fights for everybody to look forward to. I mean, which one, you're offered a ticket, which one of those would you go to? I mean, it's a really difficult one. Great time to be around.
Well, it's mad, because here's the point, and we were talking about this, it was like these 3 fights that the 3 main contenders had all felt like they were a little bit kind of like nothing fights, right? It was like, oh, this is just a waste of everybody's time. They should all be fighting each other. And then actually, it's worked out quite well for everybody that Fury is now established in America, that Joshua needs this comeback narrative, and we have a knockout artist in Deontay Wilder.
And I guess with Joshua losing, it kind of takes the shine off him for a little bit, so he has to go and have that rematch for himself and for his own image. But the other 2 are still, they kind of add into the draw, you know, with Wilder destroying Brazil in a round, and then Tyson Fury getting Tom Schwartz. Not that he was never going to get Tom Schwartz out of it, but that he built his persona there and showed his character and his personality, and I guess it's just making the rematch all that much bigger.
And it's worth remembering, Andy, that, you know, the odds stacked against Tom Schwartz were very similar to those stacked against Andy Ruiz. So, you know, we go there thinking, oh, he's going to blow Tom Schwartz away. But, you know, we felt the same about Joshua and Andy Ruiz. And I think the key for Tyson Fury there was activity, getting his 4th fight in a year, and that kept him in the gym. I think that's the key to what we're seeing with Tyson Fury. And
I think it's also with Tyson, it's down to his mental stability. If he's in a good place mentally and emotionally, then he'll have a good performance. I think when he's had those crazy up and down fights, he's been like that in his own life outside of the ring. And I think, you know, those 2 things go in hand with him, especially. Go in hand with most fighters, but with him more so, because he kind of wears his heart on his sleeve and lives that kind of way, you know, that is all out there.
Yeah, and we went to the house that he was staying at earlier in the week, and, you know, we did a half-hour interview with him, and some of it was worthy of a stand-up routine. He was in a really cracking mood, and that showed, as you say, Andy, in the ring. And I remember talking to Ricky Hatton up in his gym in Manchester, and talking about how when even just watching Tyson Fury in his early stages of a workout, he'll just jump between the ropes, and just the way he's so loose and so fluid and so languid as he moves around the ring. He's just got this wonderful natural ability, and he's got this. Ben Davison, his trainer, was saying to me, he's got these great eyes where he's always looking at the opponent. And I know that sounds like a really obvious statement, but we watched back part of Joshua's fight against Ruiz, and he said, look here, Joshua's not even looking at that punch coming at him, he's looking away. And many a fighter does that, but Fury keeps his eye, you know, that beady eye on the opponent the whole time, and reads them so well.
What does that do to a fighter, Andy, that idea that you can actually gauge what's coming towards you? Is it kind of an awareness that you can't teach, or is there a coaching difference here between the 2 fighters?
Between the 2 of them, it would be, I think, the advantage Tyson has, and anybody who starts boxing early, is that you build up instincts. You know, that will kick in when you're hurt, or that will get you through a round when you're hurt. And I think Andy Ruiz has those instincts because he has a long amateur career. Whereas Joshua started boxing at 20, doesn't have those instincts, and he didn't know how to react once he was hurt, and he didn't even know what he got hit with in the corner. He was asking, you know, and that's all from keeping an eye on what's coming at you. I don't know if you would agree with that, Mike.
Yeah, absolutely. That fighting instinct is absolutely clear, and I think it's, you know, that would be an issue for Deontay Wilder down the line as well, because he came late to the sport, and so and also they've done a lot of, and again, this might sound strange, but they've done a lot of their boxing at a very high level, so they haven't gone through those grades and learned all of those different instincts along the way, and fought all of those different types of styles that they may come up against in the professional ranks.
Mike, just to go back to your commentary, you know, we're all huge fans of it here. There was a line after the Joshua Ruiz fight, and I just wanted to, I've thought about it a lot, and it was a perfect summation of it, and it was in the immediate aftermath of it, just after the round ended and the decision was called. You said that Andy Ruiz has thrown a hand grenade into the heavyweight landscape, and it was the perfect line, and I just wondered, had you thought about that before, or was that in the moment? Because a lot of what you do is in the moment, and as your co-commentator, I'm sitting there watching the fight, but also in awe of what's going on beside me in terms of the commentary in the moment and how you're able to call a fight.
Yeah, I mean that was in the moment. I was talking to somebody just last week in Las Vegas about that. They asked me the same question, and as that was happening at the end, the word that was coming to my head at the time was bomb. Something about throwing a bomb, or he's exploded a bomb, and you're thinking about this in just split seconds. I suppose not unlike you. Just how on earth did you throw that punch against Korobov or whatever? But I then, through this thought process, got worried about what can I use the word bomb on a BBC broadcast. So all of this is going through my. So how am I going to? He has actually blown up the whole heavyweight division. How am I going to say this? And in the end, that's the phrase that came out. And I must admit, even as I said it, I thought, oh my God, how is this going to go down? Is it too incendiary kind of thing? And so you just. You go with the moment, and you trust your experience and your judgment at the time, and that's what I did. Was that was at the end of the third round, you said?
No, I think it was the end of the sixth
the end
when
of
it was
yes, the end of the fight.
Just as you were wrapping it up, and you spoke about Andrew Ruiz being bullied in school, and then you just came up with that line. Yeah, it was perfect. Yeah.
Steve once had a good line as well about certain fights in history when the dust never really settles. This feels a little bit like one of those fights where the perfect prototype heavyweight in Anthony Joshua, who was supposed to reign supreme for decades, gets completely blown off course in 12 minutes.
And the thing was that there has been kind of upsets like this as well in the past, when you look at Lennox Lewis's career and maybe Klitschko's career, but they were never systematic breakdowns, or there was never this kind of, I don't know, just Joshua broke down. Once he was hurt, he never recovered, and there was a kind of an inevitability then about it, as Andrew Ruiz went about breaking him down physically and mentally. And like where those other ones who I was talking about, the upsets, they were one punches. You look at Hasim Rahman against Nanix, or Klitschko, where he was kind of similar with Corey Sanders, and you see, like it was a different feeling, wasn't it? It wasn't like a shock that can happen in heavyweight boxing. This was a different feeling.
It was, and I think that I think more closely aligned to Buster Douglas beating Mike Tyson. That wasn't as systematic, but it was a beating over a number of rounds. And I think what that did, and it's happened to Anthony Joshua, is it diluted the aura of Mike Tyson. I remember Buster Douglas afterwards saying everybody who'd fought Mike Tyson before me had done so with one leg in the ring and one leg outside the ring. And that changed after Buster Douglas had beaten Mike Tyson. I know he came back and won the world title again, but he never had that same invincible monster type aura. And I think that's going to be a big issue for Anthony Joshua now as he moves on from here. I also remember a great line from George Foreman after he lost to Muhammad Ali in the Rumble in the Jungle, and he said he didn't just lose the world title, he lost something of himself as a man. And that world title was so much of who Anthony Joshua is that I think this is absolutely fascinating now, this next stage of his career, because I do actually think that Anthony Joshua can beat Andy Ruiz, but only the best of Anthony Joshua can beat Andy Ruiz. I think if he can go back and reproduce the performance he produced against Alexander Povetkin in his previous fight, we might see a different kind of contest. But it is fascinating because we don't know how shredded his mind is after that.
That's what I was going to ask you, Mike. Do you feel he's actually, you'd know him better, you would have met him and interviewed him a lot more than he was. Do you feel he's actually feeling the loss? Because, there's been this, he's put out a video himself where he's taken it quite well. He seems quite philosophical about the whole thing. And he's certainly insulated from, I guess, the general public. But so do you feel like, the magnitude of the loss, as it would most fighters, well, I guess, I'll say this, I'll ask you that question, but as another point, where most fighters, they lose a fight, it means financial ruin for at some point. You're fighting for your livelihood. Your next fight is, you're getting paid a lot less, and it could be 6 or 7 months down the line. So maybe he doesn't have that kind of fear, but for his own personal, I don't know, his own persona, his own ego, do you feel like he's felt a loss?
I think that's a really difficult question to answer. What you've seen on that video, I think that is to do and tailored towards all the brands that he's associated with. And somebody said to me in the aftermath of the loss, this is a man who can't leave his house, his hotel room, his apartment, wherever he happens to be, without checking what kind of watch he's wearing, what kind of baseball cap he's got on, what kind of trainers he's got on, what kind of jeans, what kind of t-shirt. He's got so many brands attached to him. He's got to check that he's got every one of those somewhere on his attire. And I think that plays into what we see as the public persona, how much this is hurting deep down. I think, only those and the closest to him will know. But also, how much now does he really want to, follow his own phrase of stay hungry? How much does he want to, as he's told us in interviews so often down the years, really make a deep and lasting impact in the heavyweight division? In my time as BBC correspondent in athletics and in boxing, I've followed, luckily, the careers of Floyd Mayweather and Usain Bolt, and these are two geniuses of their different sports, and each time they go to the big event, they find the motivation, they find the inspiration, they find the reason to keep going, to keep getting back to the gym. For Usain Bolt to keep vomiting on the track after training sessions. Now, does Anthony Joshua want it as much as those two? We're about to find out.
Mike, does that, I wonder, come back to Andy's earlier point about coming to the sport quite late? I wonder that there isn't that sort of inherent view of boxing as the most important fibre of his life. He's come to it, and it probably is still the most important thing in his life, but perhaps that desire, that innate desire, isn't there to the level that some other boxers have it. Is that too harsh a take?
No, I don't think it is at all. And money is a huge factor here as well. That when a man is earning, $20 million, even £20 million sterling for every single fight, for every single huge occasion, in the end, you have to find motivation and inspiration from somewhere else. And I think, when we look at these reasons, there have been so many rumours about why and how he lost. Did he get knocked out in sparring? Did he have a panic attack in the dressing room? For me, I've been able to nail none of those down, but I just think it was complacency, and I think also he was beaten by speed on the night and by somebody who was actually cleverer than him.
Which is the worrying part, right? Because the comparisons with the Buster Douglas fight, like Mike Tyson's personal life was in rack and ruin at that point, and he had gone completely off the rails. But Joshua, none of that stuff seems to come out. Like, he's clean cut, he's clean living. It's the bit where you get dismantled by somebody in a massive fight like that, when you're on the verge of these blockbuster fights, which will define the heavyweights division for maybe this might be the best. If those three could arrive and fight a trilogy against each other, then that would be as good as anything we've seen in heavyweight boxing since Tyson's heyday, right? But I
100% agree with Mike. It was complacency. That was the word he used, and it was the word that's just struck the nail on the head, because when you're not expecting a tough fight like that, especially when you've hurt the guy and dropped him, and just you think all I've got to do now is finish him, and then he comes back and takes your best punch in the following round and is still putting it on you and drops you, that will break anybody, especially if you don't have experience in that, So, if you compare to Joshua's previous fight with Povetkin would probably beat Ruiz, You look at Povetkin was probably a harder fight, and he found a way to win that, and I think he was mentally prepared for that kind of a fight, but he wasn't this time around.
Yeah, I agree. And if there are reasons in the background, I think that will actually help him if something did happen in sparring or whatever. But it is fascinating. We're talking about, and Andy, you mentioned first of all the fighting instinct of Tyson Fury. He's been in gyms since he could probably breathe. And you see how he reacted, in particular in the last round against Deontay Wilder. He went for a walk for a while, but then put it on Wilder again. And that's that fighting instinct. First of all, let's just regroup, let's just recompose. And then he went after him. Well, there was none of that with Joshua. Joshua rushed in after having scored a knockdown himself, as if he was the one who was responding from a knockdown. So, it was that basic instinct that was missing for Joshua. But, as you say, these are fights, and an interest in the heavyweight division that hasn't been around since Mike Tyson. I mean, you go back just over 2 years now to April 2017. You had Klitschko against Joshua. Then last year you had Wilder against Fury, and now we've had Ruiz against Joshua. Those three fights in 2 years, you could slot those into any era apart from the great era of Ali, Foreman, Norton and Frazier in the 70s. Any era of heavyweight history, you could slot that 2 year period of those three fights, and there may be more to come. I'm pretty sure there will be more to come.
The fact that Klitschko and Joshua was the start of that, and we saw in that fight Joshua come back from being hurt. That was what kind of like. So he has it in it.
Yeah.
That's the weird thing in this. Like it's not new. It's something that he was unexpected new.
Has it been diluted by experience and by money? You know, would the Joshua who succumbed to Ruiz have got up against Vladimir Klitschko? I think 2 years on, an awful lot has changed in his life, and he now has to find, you know, what Floyd Mayweather, what Usain Bolt, going all the way back to Ali and any other, you know, great name of sport that kept on doing it. He's got to find that reason to go again, to get to the gym and to find, you know, and to look at how it all came about. You know, he does an awful lot of sparring with amateurs. You know, I was talking to David Hay at the airport in Vegas the other day about how sometimes you've got to do some really ugly sparring. You've got to do some really hard sparring with horrible, nasty people, not people that look up to you and dote on you like the amateurs do. Yes, he gets all of that speed and, you know, and all of that different type of experience, but sometimes you just got to get ugly and dirty.
I'm just nodding in agreement with everything he says here. You're 100%, yeah.
Mike, I'd be interested to get your take on who is the most important heavyweight in the United States right now.
I think it's Tyson Fury, without any question. Looking at how everybody responded to him at the weekend, and I know this is like a cheesy old line and a bit of a chestnut, but when we got in the taxi on Sunday morning to go to the airport, the first thing the driver said was, "Did you see that Tyson Fury fight last night?" Now he went on to dismiss it as a joke, but he was talking about it, and you know that wouldn't have happened with a Deontay Wilder fight. Am I saying this fight brought Vegas to a standstill? Not at all. But with Tyson Fury, and this is what they billed it as, and they had to because of the level of opponent. But what you're getting is this show, you know, the ring walk, all the crazy interviews in the build-up, and then, you know, the singing afterwards. So that's drawing in a wider audience, a wider sports audience that might not necessarily stop by boxing. And so I think he could be a really important figure for the entire sport, not just in the States.
It's interesting. Like, I've been weighing that up, as in who's better for who? Is ESPN better for Tyson Fury, or is Tyson Fury better for ESPN?
Yeah, and I think it's, you know, you could argue either way. There's no doubt about it. They did a terrific job in pushing him around at the week. I'd be a little bit concerned, I have to say, now in hindsight, if he had to do that much work ahead of a Deontay Wilder fight. By that I mean that much promotional work. He was everywhere last week. Every camera that was pointed in his face, every microphone that came anywhere near him, he said something too. I'd be a little bit concerned if I was around him as a camp member about just managing that workload of media duties in the build-up, which is all part and parcel of it. I realise that, but you know, you can do that against Tom Schwartz, and it comes easily to him. But everybody needs a rest at some stage. They need to just, you know, you need a head shower, as you guys would say.
You've been in camp with Andy with Tyson at various stages. Does he have the right voices around him to be able to say, look, next time around, this is what we're going to manage, and this is how we're going to do it?
I don't like. It's been a lot of change in his team since I was around him, but I would say that in Ben Davidson, although he's young, he's quite smart. Would you agree, Mike? He's quite smart in that sense, and even Tyson himself, he kind of, I don't think he'd be shy in saying, look, that's enough, or that's too much, or even just blowing off an interview, if he felt it was going to take away from his performance.
Absolutely, and Ben's a big factor. You know, Ben is a no man. You know, in this sport, it's full of yes men, and Ben is a no man, and he really needs that around him.
Mike, there's some talk of Jarrell Miller or Pulev. How do you see those fights, or who do you think is more likely to fight Tyson?
Simply in terms of the promotion, I like the idea of Pulev. I think if he's going to face Jarrell Miller, I think in terms of promotion, in terms of the whole aura around Tyson Fury, it's a real issue, because even though it's a very, very different situation, we have to remember that he has a 2-year ban next to his name. It's a messy situation with UCAD, the anti-doping authority here in the UK, but he has got this blemish on his record. It's nothing like the severity of what Jarrell Miller did, and which forced him out of the fight against Anthony Joshua. But I just don't understand why they would give everybody in the media and fans alike the reason to rake over the past that Tyson Fury has done so much to get rid of. Because in going back to that, we go back to a dark place in his life, and I don't see why there's a need to do that. He's spoken, whenever you try and delve into that past, he says, no, this is the new Tyson Fury. Let's talk about what's happening right now. I just think promotionally, I think emotionally for Tyson Fury, that's a bad move. The problem is in the States, their attitude to drug taking is very different to ours, and already they're talking about Jarrell Miller, who's absolute filth in terms of what he's done, and he's going to be back within 6 months of being found out. It's just absolutely staggering. But I think for the well-being of Tyson Fury, and we spoke about all of those media duties. Well, a lot of those media duties are going to involve answering questions about his own drugs past, and I think it's completely unnecessary at this stage in his career when he can take on somebody who's equally valid in terms of an opponent and a stepping stone, if that's what you want to call it, between here and the rematch against Deontay Wilder.
So the rematch against Wilder is October, November next year. Is that the plan?
No. After the fight of the weekend, Bob Arum was saying it will be in the first quarter of 2020. They've just got to. What they want to avoid is anything close to the Super Bowl and anything close to a college basketball weekend called March Madness. Now they are only 2 separate weekends, but Bob Arum was saying that they want a huge build-up, a run into the fight. So they're going to have to manage it really carefully, because they're saying that this is an event they hope, in the way that they promote it, that will bring American sport to a standstill. So they've got really big ideas about this fight.
A premiere at halftime in the Super Bowl wouldn't be a bad way to kickstart any bit of promotion.
Right.
Kick it off at the start of April, right after the NCAA finals. Perfect time for a fight.
Would be a huge signal as to how big it is.
And so he's got to fight once in between. Is that what everybody thinks?
They're both going to fight once, it seems. That
and that'll be it.
Wilder will have a rematch with Ortiz, which is a dangerous fight in itself. And then Tyson would fight Pulev, which is still a slightly dangerous fight, you know, a lot more than the Tom Swartz fight.
Yeah.
It's a lot more competitive.
Yeah. All right. Good stuff. Great to have you with us, Mike, this morning. Thanks a million for taking the time to talk to us.
Thank you, Mike.
Great to talk to you, fellas. Yeah, all the best.
That's Mike Costello there, the voice of boxing on 5 Live, and it seems like a great guy to work with.
Yeah, we could just do an interview about him, and he's like, forget boxing outside in general, just with him and his life within sport, in boxing, and now athletics as a commentator. It's such an interesting guy, yeah. Is
Tyson getting better as a boxer? Like, is this the peak of him now?
Yeah, probably his peak at the moment. Getting better. I still think there's room to improve with him, because what he does is not. It's not by the book, you know. It's not painting by the numbers. It's very unorthodox what he does, and it's very fluid, and he's kind of improvising as he goes. So he could always tighten things up a bit, but yeah, he's
is the risk if he tightens things up that you take away
some of that, yeah.
So you put him in a system, and suddenly the stuff that's really good at falls apart.
But he's always had this ability, and even when I was listening back to Mike Costello and Steve Bunce's review of the Tom Swartz fight, that they were talking about one move that he did that many featherweights would be proud of, you know. And he's always had this ability as such a big man, 6'8", 18 stone, that he could move and box and be as coordinated as middleweights, you know, as smaller fighters. With most tall big men, they don't have that coordination, so they have to box in that kind of rigid way, like Joshua, like Klitschko, where they're not kind of expanding themselves or being three-dimensional with their movements, because it's forward, backwards, left, right, 1, 2. You know, it's very predictable, where he is the complete opposite.
And one other thing is, like when we talk about Anthony Joshua there and the complacency that sets in, it's very easy for us to sit here and say, how can you get complacent when that much is on the line? But it's obviously something that's highly possible for a professional boxer to allow happen. Is that anything that ever happened to you? Did you ever get a sense that I'm a bit worn out from this thing?
No, I with the complacency, you just underestimate somebody, certainly. Because you start to believe your own hype. I did the same thing. I fought Brian Vieira for the first time. It was my first fight on ESPN. I thought I was just going to turn up and wipe him away. He was just the opponent to be brought in. And the exact same thing. I dropped him hard early in the fight. Thought, okay, I'm just going to cruise to win now. And went all out to take him out. But he weathered the storm, and he survived it. And I was burned out. I punched myself out, and he came back and he broke me. And we were still fighting by the end, but I was stopped in the fight. And it was when you're not expecting a kind of a hard fight, and you could see his demeanour throughout the fight week, Joshua, that he was so, you know, he actually gave Andy Ruiz a hold of his belts at the face-to-face. He was like, hey, hold these, you know, and like there was no edge.
Yeah.
And he paid the price.
Which is a really not good way to introduce yourself to America. Like,
Yeah,
oh, look
no,
at me.
yeah.
I'm not taking this seriously at
Couldn't
all.
have gone any worse. And then you like the following week, Tyson Fury comes out and does that, like, you know, and against not an opponent, but the performance, the character, and all that stuff, and it just really hammers home the fact that Tyson Fury is the heavyweight now in America.
Yeah, for sure. Andy, good stuff. Thanks for joining us this morning.